Silence makes you uncomfortable, so you start explaining. You justify why you were late. You clarify what you meant. You add context no one asked for. You send the extra text. You fill the pause. And you call it being clear. But here's the hidden rule most people never see. The more you explain your position, the less solid it appears. This isn't about communication skill. It's about social value. Picture this. You're in a meeting, you share an idea. Someone raises a mild objection. Nothing aggressive, just a different angle. And suddenly you feel the need to defend it. You talk longer. You add examples. You bring up past successes. You repeat your point in different words. You're trying to make it stronger. But socially, something else is happening. When you over-explain, you signal that your idea cannot stand on its own. And people don't respond to words as much as they respond to stability. That's the first insight. Over-explaining is rarely about clarity. It's about anxiety, not dramatic anxiety, subtle anxiety, the kind that whispers, make sure they understand you, or you might lose ground. Now let's go deeper. Humans constantly read for power balance. In every conversation, there's an unspoken calibration happening. Who feels secure? Who is seeking approval? Who is trying to avoid disapproval? The person who explains too much is often the one trying to prevent rejection before it happens. So they stack reasons. They soften statements. They add disclaimers. I might be wrong, but I just think that maybe. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify. It feels polite. It feels thoughtful. But socially, it lowers perceived certainty. And certainty is magnetic. Here's where most people misunderstand this dynamic. They believe over-explaining makes them more respected because it shows effort. They assume that giving more information increases credibility. In technical discussions, sometimes that's true. In human dynamics, not usually. Because respect isn't built on volume. It's built on composure. Think about someone you consider high status. A leader, a person others naturally listen to. When they speak, they don't rush to fill silence. They don't chase agreement. They don't explain every angle unless asked. They say their point, and they let it breathe. That pause, that's power. Now here's the uncomfortable part. Over-explaining often comes from a fear of being misunderstood. And beneath that, a fear of being misjudged. So instead of allowing people to interpret you, you try to control the interpretation. You over-clarify your tone. You overshare your reasoning. You try to close every possible gap. But paradoxically, that makes people scrutinize you more. Because when someone defends something that wasn't attacked, it creates suspicion. Why are they working so hard? This shows up in dating all the time. You send a message. The reply feels slightly shorter than usual. Instead of matching the tone, you add more. You explain your joke. You clarify what you meant. You try to smooth imaginary tension. You think you're protecting the connection. But attraction thrives on emotional steadiness. If one person is subtly chasing reassurance, the dynamic tilts. And attraction rarely grows uphill. Here's the pattern most people miss. The more you try to secure your position socially, the more you communicate that it's unstable. That's the escalation. Because over time, this becomes a habit. You start explaining your preferences, your boundaries, your decisions, your no. Especially your no. Someone invites you somewhere. You don't want to go. Instead of saying, I can't make it, you deliver a paragraph. You justify. You soften. You explain how busy you are. Why? Because a clean no feels risky. But here's the shift. When you over-explain a boundary, it stops feeling like a boundary and starts feeling like a negotiation. And people treat it that way. Social value isn't about dominance. It's about internal permission. The permission to let your statements exist without cushioning them. The permission to let someone misunderstand you slightly without scrambling to fix it. The permission to allow silence. And this is where emotional control enters. Emotionally steady people don't experience silence as danger. They don't experience disagreement as threat. They don't experience mild confusion as social collapse. So they don't rush, they respond. There's a huge difference. Over-explaining is reactive. It's fast, it's protective. Calm clarity is selective. It's measured, it trusts, and people feel that difference immediately. Watch how conversations shift when someone speaks concisely and then stops. Others lean in. They ask questions. They engage. Because space invites investment. When you fill all the space, no one else has to step forward. Now this doesn't mean you become cold or minimal. It means you become intentional. Ask yourself, am I explaining because it adds value? Or because I'm trying to reduce discomfort? That question alone changes everything, because most over-explaining happens in micro moments: a raised eyebrow, a delayed response, a neutral facial expression, and your mind interprets it as disapproval, so you talk. But high social value individuals don't try to eliminate every trace of ambiguity. They understand something subtle. Not everyone needs full access to your internal reasoning, and not every thought needs a defense. This is especially powerful in group settings. The person who can express an idea clearly, and then tolerate silence, naturally commands attention. Why? Because tolerance of silence signals confidence in position. And confidence in position signals status. Even if you're not the loudest, even if you're not the most experienced, energy stability beats verbal quantity. Here's the deeper layer. When you stop over-explaining, you're not just changing communication. You're changing identity. You're signaling to yourself first that your thoughts are allowed to exist without justification, that your choices don't need a courtroom defense, that disagreement doesn't equal danger. And ironically, the less you chase being understood, the more seriously people take you, because you're no longer negotiating your own legitimacy in real time. There's a quiet strength in saying less and meaning it, in answering once instead of 3 times, in allowing someone to sit with your response. When you understand this rule, conversations feel lighter. You don't monitor every reaction. You don't replay every sentence. You don't send the follow-up text to make sure it sounded okay. You let it land. And that changes how people feel around you. They sense steadiness. They sense that you're not trying to extract approval. And in social dynamics, the person who doesn't need approval is often the one who receives it. So the next time you feel the urge to explain further, pause. Not to suppress yourself, but to check the motive. If it's clarity, speak. If it's fear, breathe. Because over-explaining isn't about how much you talk. It's about whether you believe your position can survive without reinforcement. The moment you trust that it can, your tone shifts, your pacing shifts, your presence shifts, and people respond to that shift before they even process your words. You don't become quieter, you become grounded. And grounded people don't rush to justify their existence in a room. They simply take up space, calmly, cleanly, without excess. That's not silence, that's control.